Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Economic Instruments and Incentives for Promoting Integrated Solid Waste Management and Achieving a Circular Economy in Asia. This is the second webinar of our series on sustainable financing for nature-positive investments, tools for integrating economic and market-based instruments into projects, produced by our Environment Group colleagues, Isao Endo and Erin Sinogba. So we thank you all for joining. So first, some quick housekeeping reminders for the webinar. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Please stay on mute unless you are speaking. There will be a Q&A and discussion session, and we really welcome and encourage your engagement. So please click on the reactions button, then raise my hand, or click on the chat box to raise questions or to request a space to speak. So we have an exciting agenda for this session that will review the trends and opportunities for using market-based instruments for waste management, discuss regional and global experiences on implementing market-based instruments to manage resource use and minimize waste, and examine the challenges and opportunities to scale up these instruments in the region and through ADB operations. Reducing waste and pollution is critical to the public health, social and economic well-being and environment of our region, and also the global ocean. So this session brings knowledge and solutions important to ADB's Healthy Oceans Action Plan. Our agenda today starts with two presenters that I'm pleased to introduce. First, Anna Raposa will set the scene on solid waste management issues and solutions in Asia. Anna is the Executive Director of SAFE Philippine Seas and the Partnerships and Engagement Specialist for ADB's Healthy Oceans Program and Regional Technical Assistance on Marine Plastics. She is a storyteller by passion and marine conservationist by profession. She also works on developing policies and designing capacity building programs and behavior change campaigns for waste management and circular economy. Second, Gunnar Colin will present trends and opportunities for using economic instruments, incentives, and market-based approaches for waste management in Asia, based on the findings of the waste chapter of Greening Markets, Market-Based Approaches for Environmental Management in Asia. Gunnar is the Director of Environment for Development, which is a global network of environmental economics research centers dedicated to poverty alleviation and sustainable development. He is also an associate professor with the Department of Economics at the University of Gothenburg and an honorary professor at the School of Economics, the University of Cape Town. Gunnar has spent 30 years working with research and policy applications of environmental economics in developing countries, including the development of a dedicated PhD program in environmental and development economics. So let us begin, and I will pass to Anna Raposa, please. Thank you.
There, There. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a good day so far. So I'm Anna. Thanks, Deb, for the introduction. And I'm here to give you an introduction to circular economy and solid waste management in Asia and the Pacific. And to start off, we have to define what circular economy is, which means defining what circular economy is not. And that is a linear economy. Right now, most of the world operates on a linear economy, which means we take from the environment, we make something, we use them, and then we dispose of them and throw them away. In a circular economy, which, as the name suggests, what goes around must come around. So, what we make, we use, and we either repair, reuse, remake, recycle, or recreate it into something else. If this is still confusing, I want you to imagine a coconut tree. A coconut tree is something that we are all familiar with in Asia and the Pacific. And every part of this tree has a purpose and has a use. It even has multiple uses and multiple purposes. So every part of it is not wasted. And even at the end of its life, it can be used as compost to grow more coconut trees or other plants. So that's the simplest explanation I can think of what a circular economy is. Now, circular economy is not new in Asia and the Pacific. We are already repairing, recreating, reusing, repurposing things. And it's not necessarily what we intentionally call a circular economy, but we do it out of practice, out of necessity, because a lot of the countries in Asia and the Pacific are developing countries. So we've had to do it because we have to. We just might not be calling it a circular economy because this term is in English and might not have a direct translation in our local languages or dialects. But it doesn't mean that we're not using it or we don't know what it is. The challenge now is how we frame circular economy in a development opportunity. How do we use market based instruments like taxes, incentives, permits, deposit and reuse schemes? How do we use those tools to operationalize circular economy and solid waste management and create systems out of that? In the last, let's say, 5 years, circular economy has become a more familiar term to a lot of us. We've heard it more often, we've read more about it more often, and there are very observable trends. So one is that there's increasing volumes of waste generated across the region. Every year we throw away more things, and COVID-19 has actually increased the stuff that we throw away. And when we look at solutions, a lot of the solutions have been waste as a resource, which means the waste of one industry is used either in the same industry, but more likely in another industry. There's also higher awareness and interest among various stakeholders. You'll hear ADB as one of the people talking about circular economy, and maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't so much in our radar. There's also more funding and other resources being allocated to circular economy and solid waste management. In terms of research and development, there's definitely more effort being put into baseline data collection and research and the use of technology, whether that's low tech or high tech. We see more apps, we see more online platforms to increase waste collection, segregation, and recycling efforts. But of course, like any development field, there are many challenges. And one is the institutional challenge. A lot of our politicians are still not familiar with this and may reflect in the lack of political will. There are also complicated and inflexible regulatory structures. These structures already exist. And of course, there are financial challenges. The transition to a circular economy is not cheap. So there's always this push and pull of who's going to pay for it, who pays for these upfront costs, and who benefits when the rewards are ready. And that's one of the biggest conversations that the circular economy field is having. There are also social challenges. Even if circular economy is something that's being talked about more, there's still a lack of awareness and, more importantly, a lack of sense of urgency. And because of this, there's also resistance to change. We are still lacking this collective behavior change to transition into a circular economy. And finally, there are a lot of technical challenges as well. A lot of the things we use now are designed to be thrown away into the landfill right after, or they're planned to be phased out. Just think about the gadget that you're watching this webinar in right now. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, maybe it's going to be difficult to use, or if not impossible to use. And there's also a lack of information exchange between and among stakeholders. But of course, I'd like to end this scene setting with opportunities, because every crisis is an opportunity. And right now, it's an exciting time to be in this field. There's a lot of news and a lot of experiments on packaging innovation and what we call alternative delivery models. So that's like refilling and reverse logistics, how companies can take back the things that they make and be responsible for their waste, which is something that you'll hear more about later. There's also a lot of effort in increasing collection and recycling rates. When it comes to the stakeholders, there's greater commitment and ambitious targets from the public sector and the private sector. So governments are saying their targets by 2025, 2030, 2050, and it's exciting. And there's also opportunity to create more jobs when we talk about the transition to a circular economy. But I'm going to end with this opportunity, which is your presence in this webinar. ADB has incredible convening power in Asia and the Pacific, in this region, and has years and decades of experience in finance and using market-based instruments. So how then do we use that experience and expertise to create and connect the circles to create a circular economy? I'll end with that. And I hope that you learn a lot from this exciting panel in store for you this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that engaging and rapid overview of waste and circular economy in the region. So now we will delve deeper into market-based and economic instruments. So welcome, Gunnar Colin.
Thank you, Deborah. Let me share. Can you see that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to present part of a new quite extensive report that ADB is bringing out any week now. And I'll just go through a little bit, if I can. Oh, here we go. I just want to say a few words about the overall report on market-based approaches for environmental management. It's of course a very timely issue, just as Anna indicated. And of course, we're also aware of the huge challenges that we're up against now, not least in the decade of action. And that's why we need very efficient policies to deal with this rapid transformation that our economies need to go through. So what the ADB did a couple of years ago was to ask us, a quite extended global team, to look at the experiences and potential for market-based approaches to management of air, water, and so we have systematic reviews, we have country policy reviews, case studies, and then we had a lot of validation of these findings. So what I will do today is just to show the waste part of this report, and there will be other webinars on the air and the water parts. And for this particular report, I rely heavily on Reza Daniels and Len LaRue from University of Cape Town, and Shivani Wadera from our ESD Center in India, the Indian Statistical Institute. So I don't have a lot of time, So I will go quite quickly through, but there is a lot of more material available. So Ernst Nurba has mentioned that there will be not only the report, but also key studies that you can draw on in your work. And actually 3 out of the 6 case studies deal specifically with waste challenges. So I should, I want to mention that there's no way that I can give full justice to all the material in the report. So this you should see primarily as a lead into the work that we have been conducting over the last years. What I've tried to do here very briefly is to just elaborate a little bit on the quantitative sides of what Anna mentioned, the Asian waste challenge and trends, and then draw from our review on the experiences. And then, since many of you work in plastics, I'll also just briefly indicate kind of a policy framework for choice of policies to deal with plastic pollution. All right, the challenge. Well, this is of course very well known to you, but it's special. Asia is special in this respect, as we will see in a few minutes here. You have a large population. It's growing in the urban population. The income is growing, and all of this leads to increased consumption, and as we will see, more waste. And there are of course ways to deal with this. And we have a big challenge in creating the circular economy that Anna was talking about, and market-based instruments could be part of that solution. So just some brief statistics to put this in place. So you see the material domestic consumption is increasing primarily in Asia and the Pacific. So almost the whole global increase over the last decade has come from your region. Now, this is just kind of the use of materials. So your production and imports, reducing the exports, but it really shows that the development is in Asia. And also then, when it comes to the per capita increase, it's also, of course, in China and Asia, as opposed to all the other places. Okay, now, is this inevitable? If we have increasing income, does that necessarily mean that the per capita municipal solid waste is increasing? Well, it might seem so from this overview graph, but you can also see a lot of variation here. I just want to single out 2 for you. You see South Africa here has a very low per capita income, but very high per capita municipal solid waste production. And here you have Singapore, that is a high income, but very low per capita. So I think this is what the policies should be all about. We have a choice here, and we need to put all our effort into breaking this kind of inevitable projection of higher income, higher waste. And that is really what the challenge that we're up against in the years to come. And the way to do this is of course, to use this overall framework. And we need to start from the top and start to reduce and conserve materials, and all the way through this cycle down to the disposal. And we need to start at the top, and economic instruments on the production side could be a very strong incentive for having industries to rethink and the design of their products, so that it's easier to reuse the materials in the future. So I think that if we compare it to some of the other sectors that we've been looking at, the waste sector is actually the most complicated. Here we have the greatest challenges because there are so many actors, and part of this is informal, and this makes the design and implementation of these kinds of instruments even more complicated, more complex than in most other sectors. So coming into how we went about this, on the methodology of this chapter of the report that is coming out, we then wanted to focus on these various aspects of these waste management kind of chain. So how have these products been applied on the upstream waste reduction, on domestic industrial waste collection, and then in the processing? And then when we did our systematic review of the literature, we then identified the various economic tools that were applied, like tradable permits, taxes, fees, and charges. Subsidies turned out to be particularly important in this sector, and then hybrid policies like deposit refund, that is particularly interesting in the waste sector, and finally information provision. So we did look at all available literature at the time. We found some 80 articles specifically on this sector with these tools in Asia. And then we drew on that for the analysis of the findings and developed the case studies. So this is just a teaser for you to get to the report. So we organized them by the kind of tool and these three kind of sectors: the upstream, the domestic, and the collection and the processing. So that is of course impossible for you to see. So this is just a teaser of two of the tools: the tradable permits and the taxes, fees, and charges. So this is just an example. In the air case, tradable permits are used quite a lot, but in the waste case, there were hardly any evidence at all. And that is because you need actually a lot of underlying kind of regulation and rights definition in order to be able to use tradable permits. On the other hand, taxes, fees, and charges were used a lot. We find scores of examples of the use of taxes, fees, and charges, and actually a lot of mixed experiences from that. So these are the kinds of details that you will be able to find in the report. Just now a couple of examples of how what we found. So as I mentioned, taxes, fees, and charges are widely used also for upstream waste reduction. And in this case, it can really stimulate the businesses to internalize this cost of waste production, right? So if they feel the cost, then they start to think through the production side. And of course, this is yet another of those big challenges that you have in this sector, that you need to combine it all the way from this very complicated combination of different materials at the production stage all the way to the reuse side. So, and we'll come back to that. But once again, this needs to be then combined with careful monitoring and enforcement, information collection, etc., in order to implement these tools effectively. On the waste collection side, there was actually even more evidence. This is really helping to sort waste at source, because then you have an incentive if you pay for the collection side to actually have it in parts that can be easily identified. So here you have potential incentives for the various actors, not least those who are collecting the waste. If you can bring in beneficiation here, then you have a chance to really increase the collection rates, which are a major challenge, particularly in Asian countries now. Here is also a place where these deposit refund schemes can be effective tools. Maybe Marianne will tell you a little bit about the Nordic experience. So there we have, for example, 90% reuse of some cans and bottles, etc. And I think that these kinds of tools, if implemented also in Asia, could really, really increase the collection rates that are a bit low at the moment. And that brings us into this whole issue of the informal sector, which is also very particular to this sector and to Asia at the moment, where you have these waste markets. And this is both a big challenge in terms of regulating the waste stream, but also a great possibility that if you bring it on board, it could really increase the waste collection and the sorting. Then on the processing side, once again, one should see, and once again, this is something that is very special for the sector, that you have all this potential value in the waste, right? And so a lot of these policies should really focus on making it making use of that particular characteristic of this sector. And there is a chance here now on the processing side, if you regulate that they have to do it, then there is also value for it. And you can, if rightly designed, extract value and involve not only employment in general, but particularly these kind of informal groups that have otherwise been left aside. And what is interesting here, subsidies in general for as a policy tool has been widely disregarded. But I think this is one area where we found actually a lot of good examples where capital subsidies could do great benefit in bringing this market on board. Then once again, we're really zooming in on this focus of converting this complex waste streams into value. And I've already mentioned that there is a great opportunity here, but of course it is complex to implement. But I really hope that you that have kind of direct insights into your programs and with all the actors active in your country and sectors, that you can be part of such a process to enable these kinds of developments, where these market-based instruments can be used in order to bring out the value in the waste and involve the informal sector, etc., because this is the way that we could really make a difference. Now, just briefly then, this kind of links into the extended producer's responsibility scheme, because you need to get the companies on board when it comes to the design of the products and taking responsibility of the reuse. So over time, this has become increasingly popular internationally, but unfortunately, at least up till a couple of years ago, Asia was not really part of this process. Only 4% of the EPR schemes were subscribed to by Asian governments and companies. So, and I think that Jasmine will tell you a little bit more about that soon, that here's a lot of potential that you should be looking for. So, these policies, there are no real silver bullets here. You need to bring in the full complexity of the full waste stream if you were to be successful. And you need to see these instruments as components in an integrated solid waste management plan. And so it's not either this or regulation. You need to have the underlying regulation and enforcement to enable people's interest into taking part in these schemes. And you can easily see this. For example, you have this moral hazard if you increase the cost of, for example, taking waste to a dump site. Then if you don't have regulation and enforcement of illegal dumping, then you're actually, with these instruments, just making things work. So these things need to go in tandem. But for that, we also need to have a better overview of data and monitoring of the waste level, what's happening, and then put much more effort into these voluntary agreements and also extended producer responsibilities to put the pressure on the producers and those who are really developing this. So we have already talked about the beneficiation and the informal sector and the need for deposit refund schemes. I would like to encourage you to go to the very end of the report, because then we are looking at different sectors and possibilities for upscaling market-based instruments. There's also a sector for waste management, and I think that you will be able to find some really good ideas there that could be helpful for your programs. Now, and there's also a very ambitious goal for a zero waste policy that you can also see if that corresponds to your ambitions for your projects. Now, I would like to end this just very briefly, because Erin and Isabel and others have been asking for kind of a policy framework for the design, or rather the design of policies to deal with these waste streams. And we actually have such an example in a parallel project that EFD has been running on marine plastic pollution. I know that many of you are interested in marine plastic pollution. So this is available in a paper format. So Erin Sinogba has this paper. You can receive that from her if you're interested. And it just picks apart then the where does the production of plastic come from? How is it consumed? And where are the different kind of disposal opportunities, from the various stages of production and consumption? And what of this is legal and what of this is illegal? And this is something that I think they're driving home this message, that you need to have this full picture for you to be successful in designing your policy tools. So they continue to go through such a decision kind of framework where you identify where does the shoe pinch here. What is really your problem? Is it directly from the pellets in the plastic industry, or is it in the consumption side? And what kind of indicators do you have for that? Or is it in the illegal disposal side? And what are then the various approaches you can use then for the illegal and legal disposal of the plastic? And finally, then this leads to a whole set of policies that could be enacted on the production side, on the consumption side, and on the disposal side. And so we were talking with Reza Daniels, who has been part of both the ADB report and this paper, and he insists that, okay, so this is for plastic, but these waste streams are actually differing in their constituents, if you like, so that you need to do this exercise basically for each of the waste streams. And just in the report, we are drawing on ADB material. There are at least 15 of these waste streams identified that one need to go through to develop a full template. So that's for me. And Deborah, I nailed it, didn't I, in terms of time?
Thank you very much. Congratulations. You make me sound so strict. So thank you very much, Gunnar, for the excellent presentation. I think you've summarized for us very well, really interesting findings from a large piece of research, and with perfect timing. And thank you also for the deep dive into effective policy design for tackling plastics. So now we come to the panel session part of the webinar, where we will hear the experience and insights from 4 experts on the potential for scaling up the application of these market-based instruments for waste management in Asia and the Pacific. These panelists will then take part in the Q&A along with Anna and Gunnar, so you will have the opportunity to discuss with them further. So I will start with introductions. So I'll ask each of our panelists to please turn on their cameras if not already. So let me introduce Dr. Marian Bigham. She is the team lead for the ADB regional program on promoting action on plastic pollution from source to sea in Asia and the Pacific. Marian led the Danish EPA's work on plastic recycling and establishing a circular plastics economy in Denmark and in Europe, and chaired the Nordic Waste Group under the Nordic Council of Ministers. We also have Jaslyn Lee. Jaslyn drives the WWF's initiative on no plastic in nature by 2030 and is responsible for extended producer responsibility, or EPR, engagement with businesses and governments in 6 countries in Southeast Asia to build a collective action and systematic approach to address plastic pollution. She holds a master's degree in economics from the University of Malaysia. We also have Terry Cho, who is a senior urban development specialist in waste management in SDCC at ADB. He recently joined from AIIB and the World Bank with more than 18 years of experience in the development of solid waste disposal, water supply and wastewater treatment projects in Asia. He also has held various consultancy roles over 11 years in Camp Dresser and McKee, becoming an international expert in waste management technologies. Finally, we have Luca Di Mario, who is an urban development specialist at the South Asia Urban Development and Water Division of ADB, where he leads the design and implementation of urban infrastructure development projects in Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and the Maldives, including 2 solid waste management projects in the Greater Mali area. Luca holds a PhD in engineering from the University of Cambridge, and prior to ADB consulted for the World Health Organization and the International Fund for Agricultural Development. So thank you and welcome to each of our panelists. So let me please start with Marian. Please can you share with us your perspectives on what we can learn from global experiences, particularly the examples set by Nordic countries on implementing economic instruments for waste management, and also what lessons should Asian governments consider when designing and applying these instruments in their own countries? Thanks, Marian.
Thank you. And those are really good big questions for 5 minutes. I'll share some of the main points, but also just for the rest of the colleagues in ADB, please do reach out also after this meeting. We have a lot of experts in our team, like all that you are experts, and we're happy to help with the knowledge that we have. When we look at the Nordic countries, that there are really 2, well, one that is really has been really effective when it comes to plastic pollution collection and recycling, and that is our deposit return system. As Gunnar was mentioning, it is really highly effective. We're seeing collection rates of almost 100%, and the same with the recycling rate actually. And what we collect is beverage packaging. And that is so that would be PET bottles. Now, collecting it through a deposit return system means we can have closed loop recycling, meaning that we can actually recycle it into new bottles, and that is really very good. So that is something that I highly recommend that we look into, and that's also something that we will be working on in our project. But putting it in an Asian context, because you can't just do it one-to-one. Now, interesting enough, EPR, Gunnar was saying that we have this experience in the Nordic, in globally, but not so much in Asia. Actually, we haven't had EPR on packaging in Denmark, and we still don't. It's been so that's kind of a key also a lesson to be learned, that we didn't have it here. It was the recycling. The responsibility was with the municipalities to collect these, and then households were charged to pay for it. But we did have the supplement of the deposit and return system, which was kind of an EPR. This is now changing because EU, with the circular economy package, decided that we should have much more EPR in Europe in general. Now, looking at very interesting actually. Looking at the northern Sweden and Denmark, we could see that Sweden and Norway, who had EPR schemes of different degree, but they had them, they were seeing a lot higher recycling rates of plastic packaging than we were in Denmark. Now, the quick solution would be that's because they had EPR, but it actually wasn't. When you look at it, what you could see is that because you had the EPR system or schemes, the government could enforce higher collection or targets for higher collection rates than they would like to impose on their political friends in the municipalities. Also, because the way that the government works here is that if the government says to the municipalities they should do something that costs money, then they have to pay the municipalities to do that. So that's what there was a resistance in actually enforcing and asking the local authorities to do something about this. Now, this is really where I think EPR is interesting, because with EPR you get like some distance. You can more easily put the request for necessary change on someone else. So that is I see benefits in it, and we are now needing to develop how it will look. And we actually the latest I've heard is that we have still no idea, and we have to do it very soon. So that's going to be interesting. Another really interesting lesson that we learned that I want to bring forward is that we started 10 years ago calling waste a resource, and really driving that agenda that it is a resource, that's something to be valued, something to be recycled, not something to be wasted. Now, with that, we also established a mindset with industry and policymakers that as long as you collect it, it will become valuable. Now, really, the lesson to be learned is even though waste is a resource, it costs money to collect and recycle, and it simply costs money to environmentally manage, and that it cannot necessarily compete with virgin materials. So it will never be able to subsidize itself, which is why what we're talking about now, that has always been the driving agenda, is the polluter pays principles. So that is really something to be mindful of when we talk about EPR, and that we know that it will cost money, and that we should not expect that it would be free, and that we should make sure that it is the producers that bear the cost of this. Now, this new circular economy requires really innovation in economic incentives in the way that we used to do it. Now, economics incentives we have for collection and recycling, but we don't really have it for waste prevention, reduction of environmental impacts, and for circularity. That is something to be developed, and it's not necessarily there yet. I have some ideas, but it's not at all what is happening right now. We have like fees on landfilling and fees on incineration in Denmark, but we don't really have economic incentives for, and then it's free to dispose of it when it's for recycling. But the next steps, what happens to the resources, how does it re-enter the economy, the environmental footprint of the products and the packaging is not there yet. Some steps have been made, but it's not at all there yet. We don't have that implemented yet. That is what we're still learning. Now, governments are in general very hesitant, or the Danish government is generally very hesitant on using economic incentives, although it is strongly recommended by the EU Commission in the EU plastic strategy. The EU has made a really good plastic strategy, but it's up to the countries to use economic incentives to drive this, and they are hesitant to do this. Industry, which I think is a global thing, they see them as barriers and instead of opportunities. So that is something that is still also to be worked out. Now, a good economic incentives for plastic circular economy should cover design for recycling, the end of life, the environmental profile of material choices, the circularity. I mean, how many times we don't just recycle once, but how can we ensure that we can recycle over and over and over again? And reuse, really waste prevention and reuse. Is really what the future's economic incentives should be have, and what we need to develop. Now, economic incentives cannot do it alone. It needs to be supplemented with ambitious targets and clear government directions, and also regulations and well-planned bans. And really, there needs to be a strategy on what it is that we want to achieve. We cannot just say what it is we don't want, because that leaves industry, it's unclear to them what they should be doing. We see a potential for greenwashing. We see a lot of risk of doing the wrong things, of promoting something that is not really green. And from a business point of view, I mean, they want also to have some sort of certainty in their investments. And they need to know that the changes that they make will be the right ones for the next 10, 20 years, and not something that a new regulation will change in 2 years. So it really is important to have a strategy on what it is that we want to achieve. Similarly, simply increasing the price or adding the cost of externalities does not necessarily lead to change, in my view. Alternatives really needs to be developed and promoted. Again, if you don't know what the best environmental choice is, then you risk doing something that is not the right thing. So we really need to be guiding the developments. When transferring the final point, when really considering using the lessons learned from here and putting them in an Asian context, here are some key points. We don't really have an informal sector. We've never had, we've started to see it for the last few years, that we have simply waste travelers coming from East Europe, who comes to Denmark for a number of reasons, but also to actually work on waste pickers for shorter periods of time, and then they go back home. They would be collecting bottles with deposit and return systems and various products and electronics. Unfortunately, it also comes with a lot of crime. But in general, really, what my experience is also from our ADB project is deposit and return systems. I'm very much a fan, but but for the areas that we're working in, we're going to do it in a slightly different ways, because we want to be working with the informal sector that's already there. So really being mindful of working with that, empowering them, giving them better tools, and creating systems that really keeps this sector, gives them better, healthier jobs, but doesn't remove their source of income. And also, very final one, don't do like us in the same steps. We took the long route. We took the landfilling, the incineration, the recycling, and now we're talking about circular economy and waste prevention. Really circumvent that. Don't do what we did, do what we should have done, and learn from that. So I hear this about, well, they're doing it like this there, yeah, but you in Asia, I'm in Copenhagen, that's why I'm saying you, but we in Asia, we see that that really there's a golden opportunity to skip a few steps and do it right, and really plan our investments and spend our money right. That is my we shouldn't be investing in obsolete systems that we then have to change 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Marion. I fully agree. I like that you've presented the experiences and then also the lessons that our DMCs can learn from and yeah, do things in a different way, in a more efficient way. So thank you. So now I will pass to Jaslyn Lee. So Jaslyn, one of the tools that has been raised is extended producer responsibility. And we've seen examples of this in places like the PRC and Republic of Korea. What do you see as the potential and enabling conditions for applying EPR schemes in other Asian countries? And can you share with us some case studies of EPR in practice in Asia? Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. To answer to the questions from Deborah, so if you look at the EPR practices in countries in Asia, for example, like South Korea, Japan, or even in Taiwan, so the government actually or demonstrated very bold leadership in driving the implementation or even the improvement of EPR systems in the country itself. So another key driver for most of these countries who have that already have EPR system implemented is the limited space for landfill, which is also a key driver for improving the recycling initiatives in the country as well. So a very good example is Singapore, where the government is now ever more committed to increase the recycling rate in the country and to slowly moving away from incineration. Because the country is running out of space even for the ashes produced from the incineration itself. In terms of the case study, I actually prepared some slides to go through the sharing with everyone. So my sharings for today will be very much focusing on EPR as one of the market instruments and interventions for specifically for plastics as well as for packaging waste. So I'll just quickly introduce EPR because this has been highlighted by Gunnar as well as Marian as well. So in Southeast Asia, obviously the EPR is underutilized comparing to European countries or other Western or even advanced countries in other regions. And there's a lacking of regulations in restricting how plastics are being produced, used, or being disposed of, and the improvement of solid waste management infrastructure, introduction of financial drivers to change behavior, subsidies, for example, or even targeted investment and the use of public procurement to drive a change to demand for greater usage of secondary raw materials back into the products and as well as in the packaging. So the EPR systems are increasingly recognized as one of the most effective system intervention as well as market instruments to address different waste streams, especially for packaging waste as well. So just to quickly introduce what EPR really means is that EPR is to assign greater responsibility and accountability to producers to address their packaging through upstream measures such as reduction of material use, for example, increased reuse model, improve recyclability of the products as well as the packaging that the producers use, as well as increase recycled content in their packaging and their products as well. And EPR also assign responsibility to producers to also improve or adopt downstream measures such as increase end-of-life product waste collection, improve waste treatment as well as recycling infrastructure for producers. And of course, the main objective of EPR is to improve the material recovery to ensure that the material can be used back in the system for as long as possible. So moving on, I'll be quickly sharing with everyone some of the EPR progress and development in Southeast Asia specifically. So although it is very unfortunate that EPR is really underutilized in this region, especially for Southeast Asia region. But I think, however, for the past 2 years, I think there have been a lot of EPR discussions that have been conducted between the government as well as some of the industry players as well. So in the next few years, we're hoping that a mandatory EPR system will be implemented in some of these countries. So for Indonesia, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry have recently launched a roadmap to waste reduction by producers And currently there is already a voluntary PRO called PRACE, or they call themselves as Indonesia Producer Responsibility Organization as well, which is formed by 6 consumer brands. And they have actually made public commitment that they will take the responsibility for the end-of-life management for their own products and their packaging that they use or place in the market in Indonesia. In Malaysia, there is also quite a lot of movement here when it comes to the EPR discussions. So the Economic Planning Unit of Malaysia, which part under the Prime Minister's Office, has proposed the adoption of EPR scheme in the 12th Malaysia Plan for 2021 to 2025. And this 12th Malaysia Plan will be tabled at the Parliament soon in Malaysia. And similar to Indonesia, there is already a voluntary PRO in place. They call themselves MARIA, which is Malaysia Recycling Alliance, formed by 11 consumer brands. And they have also made similar commitment to take greater responsibility for the end-of-life management for their products and packaging. In Philippines, there are already at least 2 EPR bills that have been submitted to the House of Representatives for 3 rounds of reading. One of the EPR bill have actually gone through 2 rounds of reading and pending for final approval. And there's also already a voluntary PRO formed by 10 consumer brands advocating for EPR implementation, a mandatory EPR implementation in the Philippines. Singapore, for Singapore, the government is now leading the EPR discussions. So the National Environment Agency has announced that they would like to implement EPR, a mandatory EPR system for packaging waste by 2025. Currently, they are actually developing the deposit refund schemes framework for beverage containers to be implemented by next year. So for Thailand, the discussions on EPR is still not as advanced as other countries, unfortunately, but there are already several corporate alliances that have been formed to advocate for EPR scheme. Recently, early this year, one of the ministries have launched the roadmap on plastic waste management 2018 to 2030. For Vietnam, I would say that the EPR discussions is pretty advanced because the National Assembly of Vietnam has adopted the revised version of the law on environmental protection by incorporating EPR into the law itself, particularly for packaging. Currently, the government is actually developing the EPR decree together with other external key stakeholders, and the draft decree will be submitted to the Parliament by September this year. So this will be followed by an implementing circular by early next year. And there is already a voluntary PRO formed by 10 consumer brands. And the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment is currently hosting the Global Plastic Action Partnership led by the World Economic Forum for this specific project. So this is just to share with everyone some of the key corporate consumer brands that we are closely working with and constantly promoting and advocating for EPR, for a mandatory EPR implementation for the next 5 years. So this is what we are proposing to the governments of in different countries in Southeast Asia. So within the first year, we really would like to get more buy-ins from different key stakeholders along the plastics as well as packaging value chain. Reviewing producer responsibility, operating model, for example, and providing capacity building for both the government as well as to the industry players as well. And within the next 3 years, we are hoping that there will already a voluntary producer responsibility organizations to be established to outreach to more producers and local companies, and to conduct pilot projects as well on waste collection, for example. And government should already look into developing a legal framework for a mandatory EPR system for the next few years. And of course, for the next 5 to 7 years, within the 5 to 7 years, we are hoping that there will be a rollout of a mandatory EPR system for packaging in some of these countries moving forward. And of course, by then, we'll also talking about transitioning from a voluntary PRO to a mandatory PRO for some of the corporate alliances that I've shown everyone in the earlier slides. So in order to achieve this, we cannot be doing this alone, of course. So that is why our approach is to really engage very closely with the government, and on the other side, to work with the corporate alliances and a voluntary producer organization, producer responsibility organizations as well. At the same time, we have been heavily involving in some of the multi-stakeholders platform. For example, in Malaysia, we have a Malaysia Plastic Sustainable Plastic Alliance, previously called as Malaysia Plastic Pact. So one of the key technical working groups under this platform is EPR working group that is currently led by WWF Malaysia together with Coca-Cola Malaysia. And of course, we are also working with other global organizations as well, such as ADB, World Economic Forum, GIZ, who has very specific EPR project in Southeast Asia, and other global organizations as well. So this is just to share with everyone that we have developed a number of materials on EPR for the past 1 to 2 years, including general guideline on EPR, sectoral specific guideline for different sectors. For example, we have also published numbers of country-specific EPR studies, specifically for Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And recently, we have just launched the EPR Mass Open online course. So it consists of 12 modules to bring through everyone some of the key concepts and key principles when it comes to EPR implementation in the local context. So that's all for my presentation for today. Looking forward for some questions as well.
Thank you very much, Jaslyn. And yes, thank you. A reminder to all colleagues to please feel free to start putting any questions that you have into the chat box for the panelists or for the presenters. So yeah, thank you very much, Jaslyn, and also for sharing those additional resources and the training course at the end as well. So now to Terry. Please can you share with us the big picture on ADB's solid waste management portfolio? What are the challenges and opportunities for scaling up ADB's solid waste management investments? And how do you see ADB, how can ADB's solid waste management projects best integrate support for these kinds of economic and market-based instruments? Thank you, Terry. And I understand you also have some slides.
Yes, thank you, Deborah. Also, I will share the slide now.
Perfect.
So, hello everyone. Can you see the slide now? Okay. So there's some few figures. I'm an engineer, so I like to show the figures and the graph. So you see, by 2025, the Asian city will generate about 6 times of the solid waste as compared to 2012. What is about 1.8 billion tons of solid waste. And then that's a snapshot of the urban sector's commitment in 2020. No need to recall too many figures, but you can see that the urban solid waste management is only contribute to around 9% by 2020. And then how about by regions, and then what's it? So you can see that there's some differences in regions, and you can see there's a particular low figure in the Pacific region, so it is contribute less than 1%. Even we are talking about only the total solid waste management, which is only account for 9% of the total urban portfolio. So solid waste management in Pacific is even lower. That's the situation we have. But having said that, you can see that there's a trend to increase the solid waste investment from lower as compared to 10 years ago. We're talking about $23 million only. But in this year, we will surpass 200 million, so it's almost 10-fold increase. So we can see there's a trend for both ADB and our client countries investing more, 10 times if you in 10 years time. But from this snapshot, we see there's a challenge and also opportunity. First, of course, why we have to increase the investment? Because now there's an inadequate access to the finance, not adequate regulatory frameworks, in availability of the land resources, and not in my backyard mentality, which all these will contribute to the providing more investment for these infrastructures. And also we have the challenge how to adapt applying new technology, but we need to take into mind that when you're talking about the new technology, it has to be adapted for the local needs. We have to consider about the maintenance capability, local scale, local worker scale levels to choose the right technology, but not the latest. But and then your client cannot afford to maintain. That is still not a favorable solutions. And we also see that there's a need to increase the capacity of government institutions, which is the key factors to one of the key factors to ensure the sustainability of the projects, as we comment from our IED's reports. So that we see there's especially a shortfall in the low capacity country, focusing in the we call the fragile and conflict affected situation country, and also the small island developing states as cities. And also we see that on the financial sustainability of the solid waste management normally is in questions. And then we see there's a need to improve the cost recovery by not only the tariffs, but also we can see some the tax revenue transfer to support the cost recovery. And then the operation, we have to find a way how to make sure the operation is to be affordable for the final beneficiary to receive the reliable service also. And then there's a trend that the solid waste sectors did not attract sufficient private sector's investment and participation. The reason why we can see that there's a structural and institutional barrier to refrain the private sector financing source and how to access to the private sector's managerial skill and how to promote the private sector to introduce or adopt the new technology in these sectors. Also, there's a many challenge and also opportunity to provide. And then in the particular challenge, we see that is now I'm still figuring it out. We're having a new studies to come up recently, very soon. So I'm covered the facts that need to the overall low engagement in the small islands during states. It seems the most of the reason is behind is because the remoteness of the and then the small of the state. So they don't have the economical scale to support sizable sizable recycling industry to support to recycle the plastic waste or others valuable waste from the waste stream. And then they have a very small land, so it is not so easy to find the right land for the safe disposal sites, or I mean the sanitary landfill or control the landfill, rather than now the practicing the law and control the landfill in the field. And then the challenge is we already present. So how to moving forward? So of course we have to see increase more investment, just like we see that even though we increased 10 times as compared to 10 years ago, but the level of the investment is still small comparatively to other sectors. So there's still an investment behind. And of course, we have now ADB has support the Ocean Health Action Plan. We have to committed to invest billions of dollars in the next 5 years. And then there's a way to help from this sector to reduce the marine plastic, contribute to these big agendas. And we also found that how to really design how to mainstream in the design of the urban project for the solid waste management, to include the capacity building, citizen engagement, and also most importantly the financial sustainability. And in the new generation of project, we have to adopting the circular economic principle in the design of the project. So we have to move not only from the waste management hierarchy, but also move it from the waste management hierarchy from to the circular economy. So you can see that in the processing, production and processing, Lisa already introduced the EPR, extended producer responsibility scheme. We also need to find out in some others agents like the OSCE, they have promote like the market system development, how to promote the recycle industry through the private sector to engage in this sector to help to divert the waste stream, available waste stream out of the final disposal, to try to reduce the final disposal volume, which is maybe is very vital in the case of the Pacific Islands. And also we have many others partnership with the trust fund and city-to-city learning suite, which can help the low capacity countries like the CITES, the FECAS country, to learn from the more advanced countries like Japan, Korea, and Singapore, and on a city-to-city base, how to improve improve the collection, also to reduce the generation of waste in the same time, even though the economic is growing. So that's my short answer, and I hope it will satisfy you at this stage. Okay, so
Thank you so much, Terry.
okay, so how I okay, so
Thank
back
you
to
very
you.
much. Terry. Yeah, certainly a lot of room for growing the portfolio. So yeah, welcome again to ADB, and very happy to have you on the team. So now we'll go to Luca Di Mario. Luca, have you worked on any solid waste management projects promoting economic or market-based instruments? Or what do you see as the potential for these policy approaches in our developing member countries? And please also share any challenges or opportunities you see in engaging countries on improving the enabling environment for solid waste management. Thank you. And I believe you also have some slides to share.
Okay, so thanks, Deb. Let me see if I can share the slides. Okay, no, I have some problems. Anyway, maybe without slides. So I can share the experience that we're actually having with two ADB supported projects, two solid waste management projects in the Greater Male in the Maldives. And these two projects are in fact one project in reality, and this project covers the entire solid waste management chain, from basically collection up to treatment and disposal. In fact, the first phase of this project, it's a $40 million investment that, oh, thanks for sharing the slides, that basically address the upper part of the solid waste management chain. So improve waste collection, transfer, and also the doing this in Male, which is the capital of Maldives, as well as in 32 small outer islands that are in the project area. And the project also, focus a lot on awareness and behavioral change on sustainable solid waste management. The second phase of the project focus, which is the Greater Male Waste to Energy project, actually focus on developing a sustainable treatment and disposal facility based on waste to energy, so incineration with electricity generation. So this just to show that basically this intervention is actually very comprehensive and is really aligned with the government strategy and priority to basically make waste as extract valuable resources from waste. So if we can go to the next slide, I would like to sort of highlight, I think, two market-based instruments that I think are quite interesting and that we are sort of adopting in these projects. So the first is actually looking at the monthly fees or for the services. And at the moment, they don't follow a causative principle. So they have just some old fees that the solid waste management company continue to charge, sorry. And they have also very limited understanding of their cost per service. So this is a major gap that we're trying to sort of address. And with that, we're trying to really support the solid waste management company, which is a state-owned enterprise, basically to their capacity to calculate what is the cost per service and gradually adopt a more sustainable fee system. We're also exploring for some part of the services, pay as you throw, for example, for commercial and construction and demolition waste. It's a little bit more difficult to do it at the household level because of, you have to establish a system around the pay as you throw schemes, which it's a bit challenging at the moment. The project is also trying to design the collection system based on the demand for recyclables. I mean, Maldives is a particular context. There is no recycling industry, and all the recyclables has to be exported for reprocessing. So the demand for recyclable it's quite limited, and we really need to optimize the collection system for that, to make sure that we are not really segregate everything and then putting it back at the end of the solid waste management chain, because I think this has also some issue from also public awareness and public perception. And we're also trying to explore extended producer responsibility, actually to address the issue of the low demand for recycling from the industry, and how to we can perhaps cross subsidize the high cost of sending this material in other countries. Now, if we go to the next slide, the second I think interesting element of market as a market-based instrument with these projects is the way the treatment and the disposal facility is actually implemented. So it's through a design, build and operate contract where an experienced contractor will be responsible to deliver a fit for purpose facility which meets certain performance requirements. Those are in terms of high performance standards based on international operation and emission standards. And also the contracts, I think, embeds a life cycle perspective where the contractor will, bears the risk of more frequent replacement if does an efficient design or O&M. And the other, I think, interesting feature of this contract is that it really promotes, the more electricity or energy you recover from the incineration project, the higher you'll be rewarded, both in terms of at the bid evaluation stage, as well as during the operation and maintenance period. So those are, I think, sort of two things that I wanted to share from our projects. And when it comes, and I think the interesting, the interesting approach that having this very well integrated approach to tackle solid waste management. I think there is a that's the real potential, and I think that's also the real challenge in our in DMCs. Often when it comes to solid waste management, we have first of all, there is often low priority. But then when there is interest, it's actually a very sort of a specific interest. Sometimes it comes on composting or recycling, while, it's very hard to understand that, this sector is very complex, and, you really need to get to address it from an integrated manner. And also it's expensive, the fact that, or you have to pay for it. And often we have with solid waste, we have this sort of kind of kids approach. I own the stuff is mine until I can use it, or the toys are mine, and when they're broken, it's not my responsibility or whatever. And unfortunately, that's the approach we have with waste. And the other challenge is lack of, I think, planning ahead, and I think it was already mentioned. So we often work with projects kind of, when it comes at the emergency mode, where, there's a big crisis in a city. And so I think this is, a big challenge. In terms of opportunities, I think we have to, try to engage early, as early as possible, with our clients, and really flag that. Solid waste, and I shared the experience in South Asia. It's a big issue. It's a big problem, and that we need to, basically start to address now and start to plan. We should focus a lot on balancing the risks also. Between the private and the public sector, because I think that there is a lot of opportunity to partner with the private sector, but often, there is a risk perception. And serious players do not get engaged in this. So we really need to, address this issue. And really, I think for what I see, we need a stepwise approach, to be honest, because in many contexts we are really starting from zero. So it would be very challenging to do everything at once, and so we need to have, as I said, engage as early as possible, support the capacity, the assessment, the readiness also. Of the planning and the infrastructure, and then not slowly, but implement this stepwise, because I think the big jump that we all wish, I'm not sure how practicable is given the context and the starting point. So those are just my thoughts, and I'll be happy to answer or discuss any question you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca, sharing with us those practical examples in use, and also insights on the context and readiness on the ground, and being mindful of that. So I'm sorry, everyone, that we have run short on the Q&A time. but I see one in the chat from James. Would you like to share your question with the panelists?
Hi, Deb. Yeah, thank you. So we've talked a lot today about what we're going to do in the future and how we alter consumption patterns and how we alter waste management for the future. But I was just wondering if any of our panelists had thoughts or ideas on how we deal with the legacy waste. I know Luca has a big landfill that he's trying to tidy up in the Maldives. We have a few other projects in island states trying to tidy up landfills, but we're seeing huge climate change gases being released from unmanaged landfills. So how do we tidy those up and integrate that with the circular economy? Thanks.
Thanks, James. Any panelists, would anyone like to jump in with a response there? Marion, please do.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you from our experience how not to do it, at least, because we've had similar, well, not to the at all to the same degree, but we've spent quite a significant amount of money here on establishing biocovers, basically putting soil on top of old landfills to mitigate the plastic, the gases from organic waste from old landfills. It was the government wanted to do it because it wasn't challenging anyone. It was easy to do, basically. You weren't really upsetting anyone, but we ended up spending a lot of money on something with not a lot of success. So not necessarily answering the question, we did talk for a while back on urban mining and the whole concept of digging materials up for recycling. It kind of died. It only was there for a few years and it never really became effective. But yeah, so hoping for some of the other panelists to know then what to do.
Thanks so much, Marion. Jaslyn, please. And then Terry.
Thank you, Deborah. I would just like to quickly add on to what Marion has shared with everyone. I just want to highlight that different countries in Asia, for example, they have different priority to tackle the most urgent areas to address packaging waste leakages to the environment. For example, some countries, for example, like Indonesia, Vietnam, I think their priority has to be focusing on to expand the collection coverage. Because these are the countries where most of the packaging waste are not properly collected. So very simple approaches in terms of expanding the collection coverage in some of these countries would be really helpful to prevent more plastics or even packaging waste to be leaked into the environment. Another example in Malaysia, for example, we have actually very good collection coverage here in Malaysia. And we have been using a lot of non-sanitary landfills in the past 10 years, actually. And the government has slowly switched to using sanitary landfills recently with, I think we have about 153 sanitary landfills available in Malaysia. Comparing to non-sanitary, we have about 13 non-sanitary landfills, if not mistaken. So what can we do in terms of addressing this? Again, I would like to emphasize on looking into the EPR implementation. However, by only EPR implementation is not the end of the solution, definitely, because, for example, for Germany, it took them 28 years to actually implementing a very successful business case or EPR scheme in the country itself. But for some of the countries in Southeast Asia, I think different countries, they definitely have different priorities to look into. Even when it comes to the EPR implementation, there's no one EPR scheme that can be adopted by different countries, for example. Yeah, that's all. Over to you, Deborah.
Thanks very much, Jaslyn. And Terry, you wanted to make a comment on.
Yes, I think the legacy waste issue is problematic. So if we are talking about a exhausted dump site, along controlled dump site, I tend to agree with Marian that urban mining is very difficult to do because you are talking about basically it's a mixed waste, so it's no value to really recycle it unless maybe only the metallic things can be recycled, but it is very expensive and also very environmental unsafe to doing that, I would say. So the practice I don't have in the Pacific, but I did several in PRC. The practice when I work in the World Bank. So the practice is the mayor need to have a very visionary mayors. He knows or he or she knows how we're going to reuse the area to be because normally this kind of the dump site used to be in the urban outskirts, but with the rapid growth of the urban, it become the urban centers in some cases. So the choice is whether if you leave it business as usual, don't do anything, you become a dirt for every citizens. So you have to make some work to decision of which is not cheap, it's expensive. So you have to do the proper, we call the landfill closures with all the leachate collection and all the gas captures. So with a long-term monitoring, and then after few years, then you may depends on the monitoring result, you can reuse it as a open space, open space, not for building, but for urban space. In some cases, it is success. Some is a mixed results. So you will need a just like I think I will echo to Lucas say we need to have more citizen engagement. Whether you in what the technology there's a many kind of technology, but what it is suit for the local needs. What's the use of the enclosed site? What kind of user you are faced into, and how much cost you want to pay for this. But in the longer term, I think it is it will be a successful story if the citizens is in the planning engagement and also the long-term monitoring and how do we use it. So maybe we create may not be financial return, but economical value, or the it's become legendary for the city. Maybe just like there's some park actually used to be. I think in even in I call it Curitiba, we call it now. The park in the inside is a kind of abandoned site. It's not really a dump site, but a mining site. So they reuse it. It become a very famous, and they are very proud of this. So it is of course, not every story will be a success. You need a long-term engagement with the policymakers and the citizen engagement. That's right. In addition to the proper technique and the investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. Luca, a quick comment on that one also.
Yes, very quick. So I agree with with Terry. I mean, when you have such a massive dump site legacy waste, I think it's also very expensive to remediate them and extract resources. But when you go there, many of these, by the way, have been also on fire. So a lot of material is already lost, and maybe also some organic material is less. So in terms of maybe sort of methane generation, it may look better than a landfill, a closed landfill. But still, there is need to basically cap enclosure and extract the biogas, and then maybe you can flare it for a certain time until there is active sort of biological activity there. It's costly, and it's something that costs, something that the municipalities, if the dump site is far away, they may not care for the next 10 years. Or if it's now integrated now into the city, maybe they're interested, But again, we have to show the economic value of it. And there are several cases. I mean, Tokyo, where, you know, I mean, I think also the Olympic Games are being taken. It was a former landfill there. In Korea, in Seoul, you know, now there is a golf, you know, so all these, you know, I think can be, it's possible. We have different examples. So it's the good thing is to show economic benefit. From ADB end, it's very challenging for us, I think, to support the remediation of dumps because there's a lot of safeguards issues that we have to address, especially, you know, environmental safeguards, environmental things, very difficult to control. It's not a really controlled environment. Even in terms of, you know, social safeguards, there may be some waste pickers. So yes, we have also our own internal challenges that I think we should discuss, but I think it's a big issue. You're right, you know, rightly pointed out.
Great, thanks so much, Luca, and panelists. I will now ask Michael White. Would you like to please jump in with the final question to the panelists?
Yeah. Actually, I always listen. I mean, I've been in the water and waste industry now since I'm with ADB, but I've been in the business now for 34 years, and I'm always listening with mild amusement at how complicated we're trying to make things. I just think back when I was a kid in the 70s, and we didn't have plastic bags. We didn't have, everything was in paper bags. There's no such thing as plastic bags at supermarkets. We didn't really have big supermarkets. And then in terms of, you know, deposit and refund systems, that was widely operated for whether it's milk or lemonade or whatever you could get delivered. It was all done as a matter of course. You know, over the course of the 80s, from the mid 80s onwards, they got this, you know, the big supermarkets and other industries, and the rise of the fast food industry gave us essentially single-use plastics. Unfortunately, then in the 90s, we spread that to across Asia and the developing world. We spread that terrible blight. So the developing countries never got used to what we were doing well before. I just look at the way even things were delivered before, in terms of the deposit and refund. They would be delivered to the house. In the case of milk, that came on electric milk floats, and electric milk floats were invented in 1946. Which was after the Second World War, when necessity required them to use this because there was not sufficient oil. So my question really is why don't we, you know, we seem to be obsessed these days, or almost afraid of legislating. Now, we want to promote and we want to encourage, and that's very, very, very slow. I think legislation works from a particular date. You have to do it by then, and legislation works very much like, I would say, you know, like the idea of the Second World War and the milk floats. You know, necessity is the mother of invention, and so when you have to do something, you will do it. And there will be lots of opportunities and stuff like that because there's no choice. So by a certain date, I give an example, was I think 1992 EU emission controls for cars. Overnight, on 1992, you cannot produce a car without a catalytic converter. Okay, so before then, you know, big business, big car companies were complaining it's going to, and trying to give us sort of bullshit about it's going to add £1,000 to the cost of every car. As soon as it came in, there was no difference in the cost to cars from before 92 until after 90, no difference, because competition plays a part there. And they had to be inventive. So again, I think things that are necessity, as I said, is the mother of invention. So legislation, I think, is the biggest thing that we can use. Unfortunately, as time's moved on, legislation everyone's reluctant to use legislation. And one of the big reasons for that is the power of big corporations, because they can lobby and work behind the scenes with politicians to avoid, and they do all the time, to avoid bringing in legislation because they have a vested interest. So anyway, but that's no, why don't we use legislation more? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a really interesting comment, and yeah, I appreciate you hitting on that. It's a very good question. Can I ask panelists, would anyone like to provide their reactions to that? I saw you all nodding along. Any quick responses? Please just jump in.
I just want to say that I completely agree. It is, I think it was also one of the main points that I made myself, that we want to have like a strategic direction on what it is that we want to achieve, and that you need to supplement with regulation and bans. And not at least that really, I think I know the industries will complain, but they are much more annoyed with uncertainties in how they should be investing and planning. So it is, I mean, helpful to have clear directions and say, this is what it is we want to achieve. Luckily, I'm seeing in our project, we've seen some really good directions from the Indonesian government that are very ambitious and good, that are doing exactly this on packaging and on their EPR, saying this will be banned, this is what we want to achieve. And instead of that, like what I am unfortunately seeing a lot in Europe, where you just like put everything in there so everyone can choose what it is that they want to do. I'm actually seeing very positive things from the Indonesian government saying this is what you need to do.
Great, thank you. And to Luca, thank you.
Yes, I think you're right. The critical issue is political priority, and also I think also citizens, because I mean we hear a lot of movements and people are very engaged, but average citizens, are they really sensitized about all these issues, and are they really willing to actually take a massive change? And this is something that it's a little bit, I think that's a real challenge, because then if you get that, then you get political pressure, right? And I think the parallel is, and the sad parallel is with climate change. I mean, we are acting perhaps too late. It's late, we all know, and we knew everything since long time. So the fact that we could have addressed this a long time ago with exactly the same measures. So I think that's a real challenge, and yeah, we hope we can communicate this better, and we can sensitize people much better on this issue. Yes.
Thanks so much, Luca, and thank you again, Michael. I think we could discuss on your comments and questions for a long time, and same with James on how we deal with this legacy waste. But unfortunately, we will have to end the Q&A there. So I will pass to Gunnar, who is going to provide some short concluding remarks. Thank you, Gunnar.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And I'll start with Michael's excellent comment. And I really sympathize with you, Michael. But the world is different now, and what we are up against is this incredible complexity. We have a lot of hockey sticks, So it's not only waste that has been increasing exponentially, but also, for example, international trade and all the production in Asia that is feeding the whole world. So I would still say that you are right that regulation is often actually the mother of also these incentives that we are talking about, and that is why I think this session has been so interesting, because you see how all these things fit together. And I would really like to echo Luca's call for a holistic approach, and that is also what we want to draw on or speak of in the waste chapter of the report. We really need to think about this from the cradle all the way to the recycling. We are not talking about market-based instruments as really an alternative to, for example, regulation. You often have to have this regulation as a basis to trigger these economic incentives. But without the economic incentives, we won't be able to come all the way in this very complicated world that we're living in. And I think that ADB has a very particular role in with your convening power to make this happen. I would also like to just stress what Luca was saying, that we can improve existing systems. So for example, what we found a lot was these kind of flat rates for example, sending your waste, but by upscaling these to pay-as-you-throw models, you have a lot more incentives. So it's not always that you need to completely revolutionize things. You can actually work gradually to improve things. Finally, I just want to, because you have this convening power and you can look into your crystal ball for Asia, I think the world is really changing. So we're talking about these kinds of regulations as a trade barrier, but think what's happening now. Just this week, the European Commission was bringing out this new proposed legislation on border carbon adjustment. So I think that just the focus on sustainability in the years to come will be so large. So where you could previously kind of wave away these concerns and say, well, these are environmental trade barriers. I don't think that it will be true in 5-10 years anymore. So once again, an incredibly important role for ADB to prep the region, the companies, the governments, and to be on top of this game and to be part of, for example, this EPR systems, etc., so that you are not caught out. It's not going to be the same thing as 10 years ago. The world is moving, and you could really make a big difference by preparing your client countries here in being part of this change and being prepared for it. So with this, thank you so much, Deborah, and I'm so excited to see all that is happening at ADB, and you're going to make a difference for the world, I can tell. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Gunnar, for that excellent summing up. So we are over time, so I'd just like to end by thanking you all very much for joining this webinar, and I hope you found it as interesting and engaging as I have, and can see opportunities and practical examples for how market-based instruments could be incorporated into ADB's investments. I thank you to our presenters, Gunnar and Anna, and each of our panelists, Marion, Jaslyn, Terry and Luca, and producers Erin, Esau, and also Trixie. So I would just like to highlight, we'll be sharing some key takeaways on SharePoint and can circulate those along with the presentations. I think all of our panelists would welcome your engagement after the webinar if you have further questions. Also remember the report that Gunnar was speaking to will be published this month, and the next webinar in the series will be held on the Wednesday, 4th of August, and that will be economic and market-based instruments for water resources management. So we hope that we'll see many of you there. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day or afternoon or evening, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.